You'll need to hear this right now because the moment Isaiah Chance walked through those prison gates, 6 Block was already waiting on him. Fam, let me say that again so it land properly. The man who helped coordinate the murder of Charles Jones, Julio, music. Foolio, the man who spent months on an ankle monitor tracking his next move, the man who his own mama got on that witness stand, music, and called quiet, reserved, helpful around the house, walked into that prison block and got his welcome mat ripped from under him immediately. Day 1, first hours. Hands on him before he even learned what block he was assigned to. And here's the part that everybody is going to need to sit with. This dude was not built for what came next. He never was. His own defense attorney stood in front of that jury and told them no cap, music, that Isaiah Chance was an aspiring rapper with no gang tattoos, no documented gang membership, no weapons traced back to him. Basically pleaded to 12 strangers that his client was just a regular young dude who ended up in the wrong place with the wrong people. That was a defense. The people paid to make him look as gangster as possible couldn't. Music even sell that narrative. They gave up on the streets angle entirely and went with his just a lost kid, music. And the jury didn't buy it either way because he's still guilty of first-degree murder, still looking, music, at the death penalty, and still just got his whole world rearranged on day 1 inside. But to really understand how wild this whole thing is, we got to go back because this story isn't just about one man getting jumped. This is about an entire fraudulent persona being stripped away layer by layer until there was nothing left but a scared dude crying in a courtroom begging not to die. And we're breaking all of it down today. No filter, no mercy. Let's go. To understand how we got here, we got to go back to Jacksonville, Florida, one of the most underrated war zones in the entire South. For over a decade, the streets of Jacksonville have been soaked in blood behind a gang war that the rest of the country barely heard about, until Foolio's name started ringing bells nationwide. On one side, you got 6 Block, also known as KTA, Kill Them All. Julio's crew, his whole identity, his rap catalog, his social media presence, every diss track, every funeral post. It was all 6 Block. Charles Jones wasn't just affiliated. He was one of the music faces of that whole movement. Detectives literally testified that he was one of the highest-level leaders in 6 Block, operating at a tier similar to how Youngin sat atop ATK on the other side. Now, on the opposing end, you got ATK, music, Ace's Top Killers, and their allies, a gang called 1200. This wasn't some new beef that popped up over a rap lyric. Detectives referenced killings that stretched back to 2018. Multiple murders, multiple shootings, bodies on both sides. The war was real, and it was nasty, and it had been running for years before Julio ever had 1 million listeners on Spotify. Now, here's where Isaiah Chance enters the picture. Gang, music, Isaiah Chance, 23 years old at the time of trial, was described publicly as a member of ATK. Prosecutors even laid out his connections, music, phone records, social media, a Twitter Spaces beef between him and Julio himself that detective preserved as evidence because it showed direct documented tension between the 2 men leading up to the murder. There was a whole recorded argument between Isaiah, Chance, and Charles, music, Jones, live, online, for the internet to see. The JSO gang unit was already watching this. Music, they already knew these two had smoke. But here's what doesn't match the narrative that the streets were selling about this man. His own defense attorney, the lawyer literally hired to save his music life, stood in front of that jury and said the following: Isaiah Chance is not connected to any gangs. None of the weapons recovered came back to him. None of the clothing came back to him. He doesn't legally qualify as a documented gang member because he doesn't even have the tattoos to signify it. The arresting JSO officer didn't formally document him as a gang member. His mother, who took that stand during the penalty phase when her son's life was literally on the line, described him as caring and reserved. Said she never saw him involved with gang activity or with weapons. Said she sought help for him for music, speech issues because Chance didn't even speak until he was 4 or 5 years old. 4 or 5, music, gang. When then one of his father figures testified that Chance had talked about wanting to become a merchant marine, wanted to travel, music, wanted to do something with purpose. Now look, I'm not here to play defense attorney for a convicted first-degree murderer. The jury heard all of this and still found him guilty. He is guilty. But what I am saying is that this man built an entire life in the shadow of a gang war that he was not fundamentally equipped to be part of. He wasn't the shooter. He didn't pull a trigger. He was a GPS. He was the eyes. He was a music dude in the silver Chevrolet Cruze creeping through Tampa nightclubs at midnight, getting music out of the car at 2 separate locations, putting his phone to his face and pinging Gathwright's vehicle so they knew where Foolio was. That was his role. He was the spotter, the locate, the digital scout for a murder he helped design but didn't have the stomach to participate in directly. That right there tells you everything about who Isaiah Chance really was. Now let's talk about how June 23rd, 2024 actually went down, because every piece of this night matters. Foolio turned 26 on June 21st. Music. 2 days before his death, he went on X, Twitter, the morning before they killed him and posted, and I quote the spirit of it, "God, thank you for allowing me to see another year." He was grateful. He was celebrating. He thought he'd made it to another birthday in a life where that was genuinely never guaranteed. He put up flyers on Instagram on June 14th, 9 days before, promoting his birthday celebration in Tampa. He announced he had rented an Airbnb. He was basically broadcasting his coordinates to anyone paying attention. Now here's where it gets crazy. Prosecutors said the 4 defendants began planning their coordinated mission to kill Charles Jones specifically because of those Instagram flyers. June 14th is when they saw the post. June 14th is when the plan started forming. They weren't scrambling at the last minute. They had a full 9 days to organize, up, and figure out how they were going to get there. They drove down from Jacksonville the day before the murder. They were already in Tampa on June 22nd. These dudes checked in, posted up, and waited. The night of June 23rd, Foolio and his people were moving through the city. Strip clubs, a gentleman's club called Teasers, another spot. He was out here living his best life on his birthday weekend. And the whole time, Isaiah Chance and his girlfriend Alicia Andrews were right there in the shadows in a silver Chevrolet Cruze tailing the convoy through Tampa. Surveillance footage actually caught them at 2 separate clubs at the exact same time Foolio and his crew were there. The state's attorney said it clean during closing arguments. They never approached the bouncer. They never approached the door. They were not there to party. They were there to locate and report. Following behind in the second vehicle, a Chevrolet Impala, were the actual shooters. Sean Gathwright, 20 years old. Davian Murphy, 29. Rashad Murphy, 32. Music. 3 men with 2 AR-style rifles and a Glock pistol with an extended high-capacity magazine. At some point that night, Foolio got kicked out of the Airbnb. Too many people. He tried to book a hotel room at the Home 2 Suites near the University of South Florida on McKinley Drive. That's where everything ended. Chance got out of the car, made a call, and then the Impala rolled up. The surveillance footage from that hotel parking lot is something the jury had to watch and process. The gunman, Gathwright, and the Murphy brothers masked up, got out of the vehicles, and just opened fire. 31 9mm shell casings recovered from the scene. The rifles had brass catches on them, specifically designed to collect spent casings so they wouldn't leave forensic evidence behind. These weren't amateurs. This was a calculated, premeditated execution. The assailant circled Foolio's vehicle twice. Before opening fire, the car tried to flee. One of the defendants unloaded a rifle into the vehicle as it sped away. Music. The car was later found absolutely riddled with bullet holes. Charles Jones was shot in the heart, the lungs, and the aorta. He was pronounced music, dead at the scene. 3 other people were injured. After the shooting, the group split Andrews, and Rashad Murphy took an Uber back to Jacksonville. License plate readers captured Davion Murphy leaving Tampa in the Chevy Cruze. Music. Gathwright drove the Impala out. Within days, the walls started closing in. Chance was still wearing an ankle monitor from an unrelated offense. He was electronically tethered, and here's where it gets real. When detectives came to the house on Captiva Bluff Road in Jacksonville looking for him, they had to surround the property, announce themselves, issue instructions for 15 to 20 minutes before Chance and Andrews finally walked out. He was holed up. He knew what was coming. And caught. Documents revealed music that Chance told a JSO detective directly. Once he gets off the monitor, he would flee the state music, and never want to be seen again. Gang, let me put that in context for you. A man who allegedly rolled with ATK, who supposedly participated in organizing the murder of one of Jacksonville's most notorious rappers, told police he wanted to disappear. He wanted to vanish. He wasn't talking about solidarity with his set. He wasn't talking about holding it down. He was talking about running. He had just helped execute a man on his birthday, and the next plan was to ghost. Real recognize real, and that ain't it. Now, here's where it gets crazy, fam, because the behavior of these defendants throughout this legal process told a whole story about who they actually are. Let me start with Sean Gathright, who was 18 years old when he first got arrested for this. Gathright was one of the actual shooters that night. The state confirmed it. Surveillance video at the hotel captured him as one of the gunmen, opening fire. His gun and ammunition had forensic links to the scene and to prior shootings, including an October 2023 attempt on Foolio's life and an unrelated 2022 homicide. Gathright was supposed to be built for this. He was a triggerman. During his time in the interrogation room after his arrest, surveillance footage showed Gathright pacing, and then on his music, feet climbing on top of the table trying to escape through the ceiling of the interrogation room, through the music, ceiling, like a character in a movie. They caught that on camera. They played that footage for the jury. The same Sean Gathright who pulled a rifle trigger on a man's birthday was trying to crawl through ceiling tiles in a police station. That's not a gangster. That's a scared kid who, music, didn't think past the night of the shooting. Then during the trial itself, one of the defendants couldn't hold it together in court. We're talking about laughing in the courtroom during murder proceedings. We're talking about outbursts serious enough that officers had to escort one of them out in handcuffs. At a capital murder trial where death is on the table, somebody thought it was funny. And then post-verdict, after the jury came back on May 8, 2026 with guilty on all counts, Gathright broke down crying in court. A bailiff had to come over and escort him out of the room. Tase, fam, in public, in front of cameras after the verdict. The same energy was not present when they were circling Foolio's car twice before lighting it up. Now, let's get to Rashad Murphy, who is 32 years old, the oldest of the crew, who in the hours after the murder thought it was appropriate to get on Instagram and post celebration content. Not subtle, either. One post showed Tom Brady and Bill Belichick celebrating a Super Bowl victory. Another one said, "Hate me kindly." Detectives testified that they interpreted these as celebratory posts about Foolio's death. Rashad Murphy also did an interview with detectives post-arrest where he initially denied ever even being in Tampa. Denied it. Then as they put cell phone records and surveillance footage in his face, he started changing his story. Even switched the hand he was writing with during the interview, which detectives noted because surveillance footage of the actual shooting showed the gunman using his left hand. And Davian Music Murphy, during his own interrogation, surveillance cameras caught him in the interview room mimicking a shooting motion, acting out the murder on camera in a police station. Let me be clear about something. These are not the moves of men who were schooled in street politics. Real ones who've been in the life know you don't post victory laps. You don't act out the murder in a police station. You don't try to crawl through interrogation room ceilings. You don't cry at the verdict. These are the moves of young men who consumed a lot of media about the streets, music, without ever truly being prepared for where those decisions actually lead. And nobody exemplifies that more than Isaiah Chance, the one whose mother had to get up and tell the world he was quiet, went to church, didn't speak until he was 4 years old, the aspiring rapper. The guy who wanted to be a merchant marine. The guy whose own lawyer said the word gangster couldn't even legally be attached to his name because the documentation didn't exist. The internet caught on to all of this fast. When the trial went live on court TV and people started hearing the penalty phase testimony, the family members crying, the remorse speeches, there was a significant chunk of the internet that pointed out the obvious. These dudes are playing a role they borrowed from the environment they grew up in, not from anything they truly were at their core. The culture, music, was talking, and this is where we get to the part you came for. Because when the gavel comes down on a first-degree murder conviction in Florida, particularly one connected to a well-known rapper and a well-documented gang war that had been running for nearly a decade, the story doesn't end in the courtroom. The streets have their own appeals process, and they don't wait for a judge. When these men got transferred into the Florida Department of Corrections system, walking onto those blocks, getting processed, they weren't anonymous. They weren't strangers. The Foolio case was everywhere. Court TV live-streamed it. It was trending on social media for weeks. The hip-hop world had been locked in on every single development. And inside those walls, information travels faster than you think. Inmates watch the news. Inmates have families on the outside feeding them information. And certain blocks in the Florida D.C. have deep connections to Jacksonville street politics. 6 Block is not a small, localized crew. The war between 6 Block and ATK are 1,200 span years and has left dozens dead. When Julio was alive, he was one of the most prominent figures in that conflict. Not just musically, but organizationally. His death didn't dissolve that network. If music, anything, it activated the people who survived him. So, when word spread that the men convicted of his murder were being processed into the system, fam, those blocks were already mapped out, already calculated. The welcome that music, Julio's killers received on their first day inside was not a coincidence. It was not random prison violence. It was coordinated in the same language that ATK and 1,200 used when they drove to Tampa with brass catches on their rifles. Karma works in structured ways when the streets are involved. And for Isaiah Chance, specifically, led the man who helped the murder happen, but didn't pull a trigger, the man who didn't have a gang documentation to even be officially labeled what he was trying to be, walking into a Florida prison block with his name and face plastered on every newscast in the state. With the Julio connection attached, he walked into a building full of people who either knew 6 Block personally, had homies from that side, or simply recognized who the new arrivals were and what they'd done. Day 1. There's a code that operates inside those walls that existed long before any of these men were born. And that code does not distinguish between I was the scout and I was a shooter. Conspiracy is conspiracy. Murder is murder. Music. And in that particular hierarchy, helping set up a man to be ambushed on his birthday is not a less offense. Sean Gathright, who was 18 when this started and is now 20, stepped into a system where the life expectancy and notoriety is brutally short and the consequences of being well known for the wrong thing are immediate. The Murphy brothers, both already past 30, both, with documented gang affiliations and the kind of social media behavior post-murder that nobody forgot, stepped into a system that doesn't forget either. And all of them are doing this while simultaneously waiting on a death penalty recommendation from the same jury that convicted them. The penalty phase started May 11, 2026. The same jury that heard every piece of evidence, watched the surveillance footage, saw the celebration posts, and deliberated for 8 hours before finding all 4 men guilty. That same group of 12 people is now being asked by Florida prosecutors to recommend that these men be put to death. Florida law, as of 2023, requires at least 8 out of 12 jurors to agree for a death recommendation to be made, and prosecutors laid out their aggravating factors clearly. Music. This was premeditated. This was coordinated. This was a targeted ambush. This was carried out with multiple firearms specifically modified to reduce forensic evidence. They drove across the state to do it. They tracked a man through nightclubs on his birthday. They circled his vehicle twice before firing. The only thing standing between these men and an execution date is those 8 votes. And in the penalty phase testimony, the families came out to humanize their sons. Gathwright's grandmother said he was a great kid. His stepfather described him as smart and inquisitive. His sister, Music, broke down on the stand. His mother's husband described a volatile family situation. Davy and Murphy's defense mentioned learning disabilities and being kicked out of multiple homes and attending 14 different schools. Isaiah Chance's father talked about a good relationship with his son. Chance himself had someone testify that he wanted purpose in his life, that he talked about a career at sea, traveling the world, and Sean Gathright himself took the stand, Music, during the penalty phase, looked the jury in the eyes and said, "I'm not here to dispute, Music, anything. I'm here to be a man and take responsibility and express my feelings about this whole situation. I feel very remorseful. This is a terrible situation. It's been a traumatic experience." Music, he was 18. When he was arrested, he's 20 now. That remorse, real or performed, came a little late. 2 years late, and a murder late to be exact, because Charles Jones was 26 years old celebrating his birthday when 31 shell casings rained down on his vehicle. He didn't get to express his feelings. He didn't get to take responsibility or seek redemption. He died in a parking lot shot through the heart, lungs, and aorta. Foolio's mother, Sandra Mays, was not quiet about the verdict either. The moment that jury came back guilty across the board, she took to Instagram and posted with everything she had in her. Justice for Foolio. The right get back. Guilty as charged. We all going to cry together. What they say. Pop a bottle of Don Julio. Let's drink up. That woman had been fighting and waiting for nearly 2 years. And she got what she came for. Now, let me zoom out for a minute because this whole case is a masterclass in several music things that the culture needs to hear. First, social media will get you killed. No cap. Music. Charles Jones announced his birthday trip to Tampa on Instagram on June 14th. He said where he'd be. He said he had an Airbnb. Prosecutors confirmed that the defendant began planning the murder specifically because of those posts. The moment that music flyer went up, the clock started, and when Foolio updated his location, even mentioning he'd been music kicked out of the Airbnb and was moving to a new spot, the killers adjusted accordingly. The man was live posting his own ambush and didn't know that a brutal reality that every person in this industry and on these streets needs to internalize. Second, music. And I need to say this carefully but clearly, the internet era has created a generation of individuals who perform gang affiliation as a social currency without fully reckoning with what that world actually demands of you. Isaiah Chance was described by his own counsel as a man with no tattoos, no documented membership, no weapons. He was an aspiring rapper, but he was close enough to the fire, deep enough in those circles, Twitter beefing directly with Julio, connected enough to the ATK network that when the call came, he answered it, and answering that call cost him his freedom, possibly his life, and got him jumped on his first day in a Florida prison. That's not a story about gangsters. That's a story about proximity, about how close you can stand to something before it pulls you in completely. Third, the streets remember and the streets follow you inside. That's not a threat. That's just a documented reality of what happens when you become the face of taking someone's life who had that kind of weight behind him. Julio was polarizing. Some people loved him. Some people had problems with him. And some people in that world are never going to forgive the people who took him out, especially not the way they did it, hunting him, stalking him through nightclubs, waiting for him to try and check into a hotel. That's not a fair fight. That's an execution. And in prison, the people who remember that, who had love for Julio, who rep 6 Block or were connected to people who did, they respond to executions in kind. What happened to Julio's killers on their first day inside was not surprising to anyone who understands how that world operates. It was inevitable. Music, and the irony is severe. The people who drove hours to deliver violence found violence waiting for them at the first door they walked through. Fourth, I want to address the crime because a lot of people online have been clowning Gathright for breaking down in court after the guilty verdict. Let me be honest, I'm not here to mock a young man's tears. He was 18 years old when this started. Some part, music, of that, even in the body of someone who pulled the trigger, has to still be able to feel the weight of what he's looking at for the rest of his life. What I will say is that energy, that emotion, that fear, music, of facing permanent consequences, it needed to exist before June 23rd, 2024. It needed to exist when the plan was being formed, when the rifles were being packed, when the Impala was pulling out of Jacksonville headed south toward Tampa. That's when the emotion needed to show music up, but it showed up in the courtroom instead. And that's a difference between the image and the reality. These men built an identity.